All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep on Abu Bakr.
AlSiddiq.
Right, the truthful. First caliph after the Prophet Muhammad. What made this guy so special?
It's amazing. We're going way back to the very beginnings of Islam. Like, what was it like to be one of the first Muslims?
Yeah, the pioneers building everything from scratch. We have this awesome lecture from Dr. Omar Suleiman to guide us.
A treasure trove of insights really helps you connect with that time period.
Okay, so who was Abu Bakr before all that? What was his deal?
Well, his real name was Abdullah, part of the Banu Taym clan in Mecca.
And they were known for.
Honesty, being peacemakers. Kind of ironic given how rough and tumble Mecca was back then.
So he was raised with strong values, then that played a role later on.
Oh, definitely.
Sure.
Even as a young man, Abu Bakr was known for his honesty, especially in business. Became a successful merchant. There are even poems praising his ethics.
Wow, poems about ethical trading. Must have been a good guy.
But more than that, he just couldn't get behind the whole idol worship thing.
Quick, he wasn't buying it.
Exactly. There's this story. His father takes him to the Kaaba, the holiest site in Mecca, tells him to worship the idols.
What'd he do?
He tries talking to them, asking for stuff. Nothing happens, obviously.
So then,
He gets frustrated, throws a stone at one, basically saying, if you're a real god, protect yourself.
bold move. Reminds me of Prophet Abraham rejecting idol worship. Like they were on the same wavelength.
Totally. Both searching for something deeper.
Right.
So when Prophet Muhammad starts preaching, Abu Bakr is one of the first to believe. No hesitation.
Dr. Suleiman mentioned some debate on the exact date of his conversion.
Yeah, but the point is, he was all in from the start. Unwavering faith. It's like everything he'd been looking for just clicked into place.
That kind of conviction is powerful.
It really is. And he didn't keep it to himself either. Abu Bakr was key in bringing others to Islam. Some of the most important figures, actually.
Really? Like how many are we talking?
6 out of the 10 people promised paradise, according to Islamic tradition, were brought to Islam through Abu Bakr's efforts.
Wow, that's huge. Talk about a ripple effect.
Massive influence, right. But let's not forget, this was a tough time. The early Muslims were facing serious persecution.
From the Quraysh, the dominant tribe in Mecca.
Exactly. They saw Islam as a threat to their power and way of life, and their persecution was strategic.
Strategic how?
They couldn't just go around publicly punishing nobles without serious tribal backlash.
Right, delicate social dynamics.
So the poor and enslaved faced horrific public torture.
But nobles like Abu Bakr.
More private, but still brutal. He and his close friend Talha were actually tied together and tortured. Got the nickname, the two who were tied together.
Oof, not a nickname you want.
And here's a crazy detail. The guy who tortured them was Khadija's brother, Naufal.
Wait, Khadija, the Prophet's wife, her own brother was persecuting Muslims.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Naufal was known for being particularly cruel to Muslims, but it shows you how complex things were. Family ties, tribal loyalties, personal grudges. It wasn't just black and white.
Must have been tough to navigate all that. But even in that environment, Abu Bakr found ways to help those who were suffering, especially the enslaved who converted to Islam.
Oh, you mean his incredible work as an emancipator,
Hmm.
using his wealth to purchase their freedom.
Yeah, like Bilal ibn Rabah, his story is pretty famous, right?
Definitely. Bilal was an Abyssinian slave. His master, Umayyah, was brutally torturing him to make an example out of him. Brutal stuff.
Awful. So what did Abu Bakr do?
He goes to Umayyah and offers to buy Bilal's freedom. Umayyah, being the cruel guy he was, asks for a ridiculous price, almost mockingly.
But Abu Bakr, I'm guessing, didn't flinch.
Nope. Paid it right there on the spot. Umayyah even said, I would have sold him for a single coin,
What did Abu Bakr say to that?
I would have paid 100 times that if I had.
Wow. Powerful. He recognized Bilal's inherent worth no matter his social standing.
Exactly. And this wasn't a one-time thing. He freed a woman who had been beaten blind for her faith, even though some thought she couldn't contribute much to the community anymore. And he bought the freedom of a slave girl who was being abused by Idinia. You'll never guess. Hit me. Umar ibn al-Khattab.
The same Umar who later became such a prominent figure in Islam.
The one and only. So Abu Bakr was already challenging the norms, risking his safety to help the most vulnerable.
It's said that his actions actually inspired a revelation in the Quran.
Right. Surah al-Balad. His own father, who wasn't even Muslim yet, questioned why he'd spend his money freeing those who couldn't give back.
What did Abu Bakr say?
I seek what is with Allah.
Boom. Putting his money where his faith was.
And that statement, those actions, are believed to be the inspiration for verses praising him in Surah al-Balad, saying no one can truly repay him except Allah.
Okay, now we're getting to the Hijra, the Prophet's migration to Medina. Dr. Suleiman talks about Abu Bakr's special role in it.
Oh yeah, the Hijra. Huge turning point. Persecution in Mecca was just unbearable, so the Prophet gets divine instruction to migrate. When he's ready to leave, guess who he chooses as his only companion?
Abu Bakr, right.
You got it. Think about the trust involved. Entrusted with the safety of the most wanted man in Mecca.
Your life's on the line. Gotta be nerve-wracking.
But Abu Bakr wasn't scared. He was overjoyed at the opportunity. His daughter, Asma, said she'd never seen him so happy.
It wasn't a burden, it was an honor. Says a lot about their relationship.
Totally. Even little things. Like the Prophet insisted on buying the camel for their journey from Abu Bakr. Wouldn't take it as a gift.
Mutual respect right to the core?
Absolutely. So, under cover of night, they sneak out of Mecca.
And where do they go?
Going straight to Medina was too risky. They hide in a cave called Thar, south of Mecca. Cramped, dangerous. The search party almost found them.
Oh man, now I'm on the edge of my seat. How'd they escape?
Well, some call it divine intervention. The spider had spun its web across cave entrance, birds had built a nest nearby.
A spider web and a bird's nest saved the day.
It convinced the search party that nobody had been in there recently.
Talk about unlikely heroes, but still scary stuff.
Definitely. And Abu Bakr's devotion was tested yet again. Prophet sleeping, a scorpion crawls into the cave. What does Abu Bakr do?
He didn't kill it, make a noise.
He covers the hole with his foot, lets the scorpion sting him, rather than risk it harming the Prophet.
He took one for the team, literally.
When the Prophet woke up and saw Abu Bakr's tears, he knew what happened, comforted him, said Allah was with them.
Powerful moment.
It's believed that's when the Quranic verse about tranquility, sakina, being bestowed on those who trust in God was revealed.
Wow. So even in danger, pain, his faith stayed strong. Putting others first, always.
And their journey wasn't over yet. They still had to reach Medina.
Right, the whole point. What happened then?
Hunger, thirst, constant fear of being caught. But Abu Bakr's selflessness shines through. After days of travel, they find shelter with a Bedouin woman, Mabad.
Kindness from strangers, that's gotta be heartwarming.
She offered them what little she had. Mabad had a goat that wasn't giving much milk, but somehow the Prophet managed to milk it. Offers the first cup to Abu Bakr.
And Abu Bakr, being Abu Bakr, refuses to drink first.
Spot on. He insisted the Prophet drink first. Only after the Prophet insisted multiple times did Abu Bakr finally accept.
He just couldn't help himself, could he? Always putting the Prophet first.
It's who he was. Later, Abu Bakr even said that just watching the Prophet eat and drink was enough to satisfy his own hunger and thirst.
Wow. Their bond was on another level.
Really shows you how deep their connection was. Even when they finally reached Medina, Abu Bakr's focus was on the Prophet's well-being.
Medina. A whole new chapter for the early Muslims, right? Things must have gotten easier for them there.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But Medina wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
What do you mean?
I mean, it was definitely more welcoming than Mecca, but the Muslim community was still pretty new, still vulnerable.
Outside threats.
Exactly. Neighboring tribes saw them as a challenge, you know. Plus, there were disagreements and tensions within the community itself.
I guess starting a new society is never simple.
Not at all. It takes time to figure everything out, establish systems, work through disagreements. But the Hijra, it gave them a chance. Space to breathe, freedom to develop their social and legal frameworks, and Abu Bakr, he was right there in the thick of it.
Makes sense. He'd been by the Prophet's side for so long, witnessing everything firsthand. Must have given him a unique perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He had a deep understanding of the faith, the Quran, the whole system. Dr. Suleiman actually talks about this situation with the collection of zakat, really highlights Abu Bakr's leadership.
Remind me, zakat is?
The almsgiving.
Yeah.
One of the 5 pillars of Islam.
Right. So what happened?
Well, some Bedouins had recently converted. They were new to all this, obviously.
Still learning the ropes.
Exactly. So one day they go to the Prophet, kind of anxious about their zakat, want to make sure it's being handled correctly.
I can see why they'd be concerned. It's a big deal, making sure the money goes where it's needed.
Huge. It's all about taking care of each other, social responsibility. And the Prophet, without missing a beat, turns to Abu Bakr and says, go with them.
He trusted him completely. Like, Abu Bakr was the obvious choice.
Known for his honesty, attention to detail. Perfect for managing something like this. But, get this.
What? Did something happen?
As Abu Bakr's collecting the zakat, he comes across this guy who'd given a pretty big donation.
Okay. And?
Later, the guy comes back, says he actually gave more than he did.
Trying to pull a fast one. Maybe hoping for some extra recognition.
Maybe. But Abu Bakr wasn't having it. He's like, nope, I wrote down exactly what you gave, and I'm sticking to it.
Stood his ground. He could have just changed the records and avoided a whole thing.
He could have. But truth and fairness, those were his priorities. No matter who you were, you had to follow the rules.
Setting a precedent. Shows how seriously they took the zakat system.
Big time. And you know what? This whole incident, it's believed to have inspired a verse in the Quran.
No way, really.
Yep. In Surah At-Tawbah. Emphasizes honesty, especially when it comes to charity. Transparency and accountability, that's the key.
So Abu Bakr's actions, they literally shaped the Quran. That's wild.
His integrity had a ripple effect. It's amazing to see how personal ethics can influence the development of religious principles.
It's all connected, huh? So through all this, I'm guessing his relationship with the Prophet was still super important to him.
Oh, absolutely. Their bond just got stronger over time.
Yeah.
Aisha, the Prophet's wife, tells this story. One day the Prophet is sick, pretty bad. So Abu Bakr leads the prayer in his place.
Makes sense. Natural choice.
Right. But while Abu Bakr is leading the prayer, the Prophet, even though he's sick, comes to the mosque.
He couldn't stay away.
Mhm.
Even when he was feeling awful, the Prophet's dedication to his community never wavered.
Exactly. And Abu Bakr tries to step back, let the Prophet lead, but the Prophet insists he keeps going.
So they led the prayer together.
Side by side. It's such a powerful image of their shared leadership, their mutual respect.
More than just religious figures, you know. You see the deep friendship between them. But of course, this leads us to the Prophet's death. I can't even imagine how Abu Bakr must have felt.
It was devastating for the whole community.
Yeah.
Aisha described Abu Bakr as being in shock, like he couldn't believe it was real. He went to the Prophet's chamber, kissed his forehead, just wept.
Heartbreaking. And the community itself, they must have been reeling. Their leader, their guide, gone.
Chaos. So much uncertainty about the future. The Ansar, the people of Medina who had welcomed the Muslims.
They were the ones who offered them refuge back in the day.
Right. They gathered to discuss what to do next. Who would lead them now?
Huge decision. The whole future of the Muslim community was at stake.
No pressure, right? And during this gathering, there's debate. Some of the Ansar felt like the leadership should stay with them. They'd been so instrumental in building the community in Medina.
I get it. They'd sacrificed a lot, been there from the beginning.
Totally. But others, like Umar ibn al-Khattab, they saw things differently. They felt the leader should be someone close to the Prophet, someone who truly understood his vision.
Someone to carry the torch, so to speak. And they had a specific person in mind, didn't they?
Oh yeah. Umar steps up and nominates Abu Bakr. He lays it all out. His character, his faith, his dedication to the Prophet.
That must have been a powerful speech to convince everyone.
It was. And ultimately, the community unanimously pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr. He became the first caliph.
Wow. From the grief of losing the Prophet to choosing a new leader to carry on his legacy, big changes.
Massive. And right away, Abu Bakr is facing all kinds of challenges.
Like what?
Well, after the Prophet's death, some tribes saw an opportunity. They started rebelling, trying to break away from Medina's authority.
They wanted to go back to their old ways.
Basically, these uprisings, the Ridda Wars, they almost tore the Muslim community apart.
Talk about a trial by fire. Abu Bakr had to hold everything together. So how'd he handle it? Military force.
He definitely used military force when he had to, but he was also smart about it.
Strategic.
Exactly. He understood that some people were genuinely rejecting Islam, but others, they were just misled or caught up in tribal loyalties. He tried to make a distinction.
So he didn't treat everyone the same?
Nope. His goal wasn't just to win battles, it was to win hearts and minds. He wanted to bring people back into the fold, if possible.
Kind of a firm but fair approach.
Exactly. And it worked. Under his leadership, the Muslim armies put down the rebellions, brought unity back to Arabia.
It's impressive, but I'm sure dealing with rebellions wasn't his only accomplishment.
Oh, far from it. One of the most important things he did was initiate the compilation of the Quran.
Hold on, the Quran wasn't a book yet.
Not a single unified book, no. The revelations had been written down on all sorts of stuff. Parchment, leather, even bones. And a lot of companions had memorized them.
But there wasn't one official version.
Right. And Abu Bakr realized how important it was to change that, especially after so many companions who knew the Quran by heart died during the Ridda Wars.
Had to preserve those words.
Absolutely. So he put together a team of scribes, led by Zayd ibn Thabit, to gather everything and create one authoritative text.
That's a huge responsibility. They were essentially creating the Quran as we know it today.
Incredible, right? A legacy that continues to this day. His foresight, his respect for the word of Allah, it all shines through.
So, in just a couple of years, Abu Bakr managed to put down rebellions, strengthen the Muslim state, and set the stage for the preservation of the Quran. Not bad.
Not bad at all. Even though his reign was short, it was a time of immense achievement. He laid the foundation for everything that came after.
Sadly, it was a short time. How long exactly?
Just over 2 years. 2 years and 3 months?
What happened?
The details are a little unclear, but it seems he just got sick. Passed away peacefully in Medina. There were some rumors about poisoning, but nothing's ever been confirmed.
It's always a reminder, isn't it? Even the most influential figures, their time is limited, but their impact can be huge.
Abu Bakr's legacy is definitely huge. Faith, integrity, compassion. He embodied it all. And his dedication to the Prophet, to the Muslim community, inspiring.
Before we move on to the next part, I'm curious, what resonates with you most about Abu Bakr?
Hmm, that's a good question. For me, it's the combination of his rock-solid faith and his humility. He was absolutely certain about Islam, completely devoted to the Prophet, willing to sacrifice anything. But he never wanted power for himself. He just wanted to serve.
He wasn't about the spotlight. He led by example, quietly and consistently.
Exactly. And look at what he achieved. Building the community, challenging social norms by freeing slaves, supporting the Prophet through everything, navigating those crazy political situations, and then taking the initiative to preserve the Quran. That's incredible.
It really makes you think, how can we, in our own lives, live up to that example? How can we be more selfless, more dedicated to something bigger than ourselves?
That's the question, isn't it? We might not face the same challenges as Abu Bakr, but we can learn from his spirit. Be more truthful, more compassionate, more willing to help others.
And maybe, just maybe, we can each make a difference in our own way, just like he did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive back into Abu Bakr's story. It's really fascinating how his personality shaped his leadership style. He wasn't a flashy guy, not a big speech maker. He just lived his faith, quietly but powerfully. It's amazing to think about the impact he had just by being himself. No need for fancy speeches or power plays.
Right. It wasn't about Abu Bakr. It was about something much bigger.
Building a just and compassionate society guided by faith. And his actions always matched his words.
Like you were saying, freeing enslaved people,
Yeah.
even when it went against the grain.
Bilal ibn Rabah, that story is so powerful. Abu Bakr saw his inherent dignity no matter what society said.
And that wasn't just a one-off thing. It was part of a bigger pattern. His dedication to freeing enslaved people, it actually helped shape Islamic teachings on human rights and social justice.
His actions had a ripple effect, inspiring others to do the right thing.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what kind of impact are we having with our own actions? What are we putting out into the world?
Big questions for sure. But Abu Bakr's life shows us that we can make a difference. Even small acts of kindness and courage can have a huge impact.
Totally agree. It's about being mindful, intentional, living according to our values day in and day out.
And speaking of values, we can't forget his title, AlSiddiq, the truthful. It wasn't just about being honest, it was about living with integrity.
Aligning your actions with your words, your beliefs, walking the walk.
And people trusted him because of that. He was reliable, dependable, especially crucial during those early years when everything was so uncertain.
Oh, absolutely. He was a source of stability, a calming presence. People were drawn to his sincerity, his humility. They knew he always had the best interests of the community at heart.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Abu Bakr's life, any final thoughts for our listeners? What can we learn from his story?
Well, going back to that idea of truthfulness, I think it's worth asking ourselves, what does it really mean to be truthful? Not just in what we say, but in how we live our lives.
But to be a person of integrity, someone others can depend on.
Exactly. How can we cultivate that kind of authenticity in our own lives? How can we make sure our actions reflect our values?
Big questions to ponder. But I think that's the beauty of studying figures like Abu Bakr. It challenges us to be better, to strive for something more.
And maybe by doing that, we can create a world that's a little bit closer to the one he envisioned. A world based on truth, justice, and compassion.
Beautifully said. It's been an amazing journey exploring Abu Bakr's life with you. I hope our listeners have learned something new and feel inspired by his incredible story. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, keep diving deep.